Hey there, community. This is Boo, Community Evangelist with the F5 DevCentral team, and welcome to this week's or this month's or this year's DevCentral Connects. It has been a while since I have been on live on this live stream, so I'm excited to be on. If you have not been following me, if you might follow me on whether it's LinkedIn or on YouTube, on DevCentral's YouTube, or on X or Twitter, I have been to a number of events out in the field, which has been really exciting, and getting an opportunity to see the community out in action, learning and doing community things together, interacting with each other. So that's been really exciting for me to be a part of, and as a result, have not been as consistent on DevCentral Connects. However, it is the case where if an interesting topic comes up, we would love to be able to chat about it on the live stream, and that is what we're doing today. So today we're going to be talking about the new NGINX certification that just came out. And a few folks have actually gone through that already. And in a few moments here, I'll bring on Dylan, who is one of those folks who was one of the first people to actually have gone through the certification and passed it. But when it comes to certifications, I just had this chat last week with somebody who was just talking about how important they are to one's career. They're attached to potentially a product name or a vendor name. But I know when I was first going through my education after high school and eventually deciding that technology would be a route that I wanted to pursue, it was all about the certifications. Like, I went to school for a certificate program, and through that, I exited with a bunch of IT certifications. And those certifications, while, as you get further into your career, some people will debate whether or not they're important. Early on in my career, it was really important. And even as I progressed through my career, there were points where I was working for a consulting company, and it was really important to have those certifications to be able to prove to the people that I was working with, as far as peers or my management or customers that I was working with and other partners as well, and the vendors of the tools that we were implementing at that consulting company. It was really important to be able to demonstrate those skills. And the only real way to do that, I think, is, well, two ways to do that. I mean, installing the stuff and making it work is obviously the way to show off your ability to work with the product. But the other way to do that is through certifications and having that proof and that evidence that you've gone through something to prove your knowledge about the product. So I'm really excited that NGINX has a certification now. And what I'll do is I'll be bringing on Dylan here. And Dylan is somebody who has gone through that certification process, and we'll be chatting about that in just a second here. So just hang on for a bit, and I will bring on Dylan. Hey, Dylan, how's it going?
It's going well. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Dylan, you are from, actually, hold on here. I'm missing our names here. There we go. We are now labeled. So we've got Dylan Thomas. Dylan, you are with World Tech IT, who is one of our really strong partners, actually, for F5 and NGINX. Now, we'll talk about that in a second, but really strong partner of ours, and is led by Austin Gerasi, who is a DevCentral MVP. So we're always really excited to be able to work with Austin or any of his teammates there as well. But Dylan, you are a director of cloud and DevOps there. So maybe I'll just give you a second to introduce your role at World Tech IT.
Absolutely. And World Tech is a smaller company, so a lot of us take on many hats. So our directors are all frontline people as well. So while I'm a director in nomenclature, I'm also very involved and very entrenched in supporting our clients, right? And so that involves being hands-on with our varying technologies that we support. Personally, I started in network security about 12 years ago after a stint as a web developer. I worked for a large MSP where I built a lot of networking foundational skills and exposure with firewalls, load balancers, routers, and switches. I would say about 8 to 10 years ago, I began my focus on just application delivery controllers. And then over the years, I've worked closely with F5 and have an affinity for their products. One of the things that's appealing about F5, which translates to NGINX, was while the F5s have a very intuitive and easy to use shell, I became accustomed to managing the devices through their base OS, and I really enjoy like that flexibility and that level of control. So when F5 acquired NGINX, I was eager to kind of build on that paradigm and to work with like a true open source products, right? So that's kind of my transition into the NGINX area.
Oh, fantastic. Cool. Yeah, sounds like that explains why you're pretty excited about this and wanted to get into the certification. So that's pretty awesome. World Tech IT, I'll mention as well. So for folks who don't know, we've mentioned that it's led by Austin Gerasi, DevCentral MVP, holds a number of F5 focused experts on there. They really concentrate. Most of your guys' work, I believe, is around F5 or surrounding technologies as well. And so for everybody there, as you said, a lot of technical folks there, hands-on keyboard type folks, and NGINX playing into that as well for you. Now, NGINX did not have a certification prior to this. So this is a new thing for NGINX. We will have an article on DevCentral shortly around this. It's going to have a number of resources for folks to be able to take a look at how to get started with the certification. I've got a couple things here. Let me see if I can actually share my screen. I should have tested that before I did this, but let's just try it live and see what happens. Okay, cool. So I've got the certification FAQ up here, and we've got a blueprint up on here. I'll actually throw these into the chat as well, so folks can grab that. And I think we might have a couple helpers in the background who might just want to check if there is if these links are popping up as well. But for folks who want to, they can follow along with this. And maybe, Dylan, we can kind of get into, as far as the certification goes, like how did you get started as far as studying for this? What was your process for getting ready?
Absolutely. So first, I kind of gathered some reference materials. With F5, I think there's a lot more published specific community resources, from F5 official. With NGINX, I found myself a lot more surfing official documentation, and it really came in two flavors for me, right? One of those was the NGINX cookbook that you can download for free from F5. I found that had a very concise breakdown of directives, design, installation, and other concepts. And it was very readable and intuitive. And then in addition to that cookbook, I also used just the official NGINX documentation on their website for understanding directives and really that granular drill down into the directives and their use cases. So I would say with those two materials, those are basically my reference materials when walking through the certification blueprint, in addition to Google, right? If I felt like there was any gaps or maybe I needed some additional high level understanding, I wouldn't hesitate to just type in that concept or that objective into Google and kind of go from there. And the questions in the blueprint too, I'll say this, as you go through, it's very easy just to come up with the answer. I would say, since NGINX has such a low barrier to entry to get hands-on experience and to truly lab it and deploy it, that as you go through those questions, don't just find the answers, get on your local instance and truly play with the directives and try to understand them. Try to break the configuration and troubleshoot reload failures. Really work through trial and error. And there's no reason not to, right? I know when I was working with F5s, it was very difficult to get hands on the platform, but NGINX doesn't have that barrier at all. So like I said, I would really encourage, before you even start walking through these blueprints, to have that local instance and to start playing with these directives and these configurations on device.
That's awesome. Maybe, so I guess two parts out of that. First, I kind of want to dig into what you saw in the blueprint here as far as what people might study. And then you mentioned testing and stuff like that. So we'd love to get into what a lab might look like for this.
Absolutely.
But, if you recall through this blueprint here, so I'm just looking at this, it's about 5 pages long. And so the certification is called F5 Certified Administrator, NGINX, F5-CA. comma NGINX. So it's going to go through. Oh, you're earning the certification. You got 4 exams: NGINX management, configuration knowledge, configuration demonstrate, and NGINX troubleshooting. And then you get this credential, and then you have. So you went through all 4 of these, Dylan?
Absolutely.
Nice.
And I more or less went line by line, right? And I made
Mm.
sure when I got to the question at hand that I didn't just provide a canned answer, because it's very easy to you can just copy and paste some of these questions and concepts into Google and get a very direct answer. But I wanted to make sure I really understood it, and since I had no hurdles in place, I might as well actively lab all of these scenarios, right? And so I just want to make sure that as other people are climbing through this outline and this blueprint, that you're not hesitating to build that real experience, because as you start getting more and more exposure, it's going to continue to build on itself, and you're going to see these concepts start to tie in with each other, repeat themselves, etc. So I would really just encourage people not to take a book approach here, to really get entrenched into NGINX itself, and when you see a question, to try to play with it in a live environment.
So we have already got a question here that sets this up perfectly. Where can I get how to simulate NGINX environment for labs and be able to study? So maybe we can get into what your lab looked like, Dylan.
So I'll say this there's varying ways that you can approach it. I can definitely share the way that I approached it and some of the ways that I think makes sense. Like I'm saying, that you can lab NGINX with extremely a low to non-existent barrier to entry, right? So in my mind, what immediately comes to mind is containers or virtual machines. So either one of those is a great way to deploy NGINX locally and get that hands-on experience. For instance, I work from a Mac, right? So I installed Docker Desktop, then I'm able to launch containers with my preferred flavor of Linux, and then with NGINX installed. And there's also varying setups from there that I tried as well. But outside of just my involvement with the Mac, sorry, let me mute that.
No worries.
But you can even install NGINX on like the WSL on Windows, or using Brew on the Mac OS, right? But beyond that, you can also use you can run virtual machines with a local hypervisor such as VirtualBox. VirtualBox is free. I use VMware Fusion, but that's one of the ways that you could launch local virtual machines. I would also say that when we're installing NGINX on a Linux distro, Ubuntu is one of the more common ones with plenty of reference literature out there. That's also free. Going back to containers, there's an official Docker image that you can pull that has NGINX pre-installed. You can also experiment with creating your own Docker files and installing those packages yourself. That'll also help build some skill sets in the containerization area. And I would also say this: if you're building your internal lab in your local lab environment, containers may also offer you some more flexibility into being able to deploy that back-end application that you can test load balancing against. And while there's reference architectures and applications for that purpose, what I did was very simple. I would just launch additional vanilla Apache containers, or I would build additional NGINX containers as web servers, and I would load balance to those. I would have those configured as my upstream members. And so I was able to have like an entire ecosystem on my local machine of web servers I load balance to, and the NGINX reverse proxy instances, all free, all deployed locally, with my ability to control both the application nodes and the reverse proxy layer.
I kind of wonder too, and we've actually had an episode or two of the live stream talking about home lab setups, but did you find yourself, you went the route of containers, and you did mention like ways that people might do a local install, but I'm guessing, if you were to do containers, then you can kind of create almost environments, albeit local, for certain setups. Did you find that you were doing that for studying for this? Like you kind of had like a setup that was geared towards more load balancing, maybe another setup for different functions?
So I'm a little bit fortunate in that I have some client environments that I also had exposure to when I was studying. So I had some variance there that I didn't have to account for personally within my local lab.
Hmm.
But what was really powerful about the local lab is that I could take a variety of NGINX configurations and quickly load them into a new container and start testing behavior. So in my experience, I could even take entire customer configurations, maybe some small massaging, and then deploy that locally and start working through a whole different environment with very little legwork being done on my end. But I would say for the most part, I got very far with just very simple, basic web servers, and then a single Nginx instance, which I would massage to the use case I was currently solving for.
Mm-hmm. That's
Um,
awesome.
well, and real quick, I just want to add this.
Mm-hmm.
While I used vanilla Apache servers for my backend web servers, you could also use Nginx as a web server, and that would tie in with a lot of the other concepts that are being taught here. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
actually, that's a good point. I'm just looking through the exam blueprint here. Oh yeah, there is a section on configure Nginx as a web server.
Absolutely. And I would say too, like as a use case that you would see out in the wild, you're very commonly going to see Nginx leveraged in that way as well. So not only is it in the blueprint, but it's something that's very real world applicable. So if I was building a lab environment right now, I would definitely try to use, or I would use Nginx as my web server as well, not just my proxy layer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just pulling that up here. So that is part of, let me go back here. We've got the exam configuration knowledge exam. So that is 1.3. We've got 1.4, configure Nginx as reverse proxy, content cache server, and the load balancing. So,
and there's one more thing that you can do when you build your environment. It's also important to understand how you might install Nginx, either through pre-compiled packages or compiling yourself with a configure script. The certification exam is also going to reference that and cover that. So you're going to want to be familiar with both methods. And I think doing container deployments or local VMs really helps you get experience there too.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Awesome. One other thing, so we've actually had a previous live stream around studying for the certified Kubernetes admin exam. And so one of the things that came out of that was the guys were really into study groups. So, I mean, for you, you've got colleagues that are right there easily accessible
Right.
and to chat with. But did you come across, or maybe it's for other certifications as well, like study groups for finding other people to collaborate with?
And I can kind of lend some of my own personal experience here. So, you're right. I've been in the network security field long enough where I've got peers, that I can bounce these ideas and concepts off, whiteboard with, study together, etc. Also, World Tech being a cutting edge employer, there's plenty of people and there's plenty of desire and appetite to kind of stay ahead of the curve, right? But if I wasn't in my current situation, what I would do is I wouldn't hesitate to find peers. Maybe one of the outlets that you could look would be like the official Nginx Slack channel. There's the official Nginx Slack. I know there's several channels. Some of them, lend themselves to question and answers and things of that nature. So I would potentially keep my eyes open for interested peers on a medium such as that. But more importantly, I would look for peers through commonalities such as other foundational trainings, right? It's very unlikely that you're studying Nginx in a vacuum. I'm guessing that you're also entertaining foundational training such as networking, whether it's CCNA or maybe system administration, maybe it's an RHCE or something like that. I would make sure that you're networking and that you're talking to your peers in those foundational trainings and finding other people that may be interested in networking. While they may or may not be interested specifically in Nginx, they may have complementary understandings of other technologies, and they may want to work with you regardless, right? They might have an appetite for more of like a web inspection router or something that might be a complementary technology to what you're trying to do. But I would just keep an open mind, like I said, and then identify peers and other types of trainings that you may or may not be attending, in addition to that official Slack channel.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Like Nginx is just one aspect of an environment. And, already immediately, if somebody was, if this was their first certification, and so they're having to not only learn Nginx, but they're having to learn possibly Docker or Podman or something like that, or a VMware environment. Like, this is a lot to take in. And so hopefully they can find those people that can help them out with all the additional things that you have to learn. On top of that, you recommended a distro for via Ubuntu as well, and they might not be, into Linux just yet. And so that might be something that they have to grasp. I did paste in the link here to, it's talking about the community Slack for NGINX. So they run their community on there, and we'll also have an article on DevCentral. If you frequent DevCentral more, we can link to the community Slack, but also you can ask questions in there. That there'll be a comment section attached to that, and you can ask your questions there. But great question. We've got, we run these for about a half hour or so. So we got about 5 minutes left, I would say, for folks who might want to ask questions. But one question I'll have for you, Dylan, is when it comes to the operating system layer, and you mentioned that as well, you like to work your way up from that layer. How much of that, or how much of the exams, or I should rephrase that to, how much knowledge should you have around base operating system and its interaction with NGINX?
So, I mean, honestly, your familiarity with the Linux system is not just going to help you deploy and configure NGINX. It's also going to be pivotal in your ability to troubleshoot NGINX. You're going to see a variety of behaviors out in the wild. You're going to have to troubleshoot network connectivity. It might be layers 2, might be layers 3, et cetera. So you're going to want strong foundational skill sets in various areas. And there's really no gaps there. You really want to be a solid, I would say, have a solid system administrator skill set and networking skill set. And I can just kind of relate some of these skills to how it might impact your ability to administrate NGINX. Like, for instance, you're going to want to have a good understanding of regex. That's going to come into play when you configure your server name directives. It's also going to come into play if you ever have to parse log files and you're really trying to find out why something's failing or why a client may be having a bad experience. You're also going to want to, understand ARP potentially. If you're having issues reaching your network gateway, you're going to have to troubleshoot layer 2 connectivity. You're also going to be supporting a lot of web applications, right? So you're going to have to understand the 4-way handshake in case you have to troubleshoot TLS. You're also going to want to have a good awareness of HTTP status codes. HTTP status codes is just a real irrefutable at-a-glance way to diagnose web service health. And so there's various foundational skill sets that are really not only going to assist you in configuring and deploying NGINX, but are going to be very pivotal to your ability to troubleshoot and to support actual deployments, actual clients, actual backend applications, right? So I can't stress enough how important foundational Linux skills are, and how important those networking skills are as well.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And real quick, I just kind of wanted to throw in a few command line utilities that you're going to want to be familiar with outside of just like those foundational knowledges. And so you're going to want to have some experience with curl, TCP dump, and other things that you might use to diagnose and troubleshoot within an environment. And sorry to kind of filibuster there a bit, Boo, but I think those were worth mentioning outside of those skill sets as well.
I just popped them into the chat as well, so they're recorded forever. Curl, TCP.
Invaluable.
Yeah. That's awesome, and super helpful as well. We'll try to get that into the article, just as far as notes for folks to think about as well. I don't know. I'm just trying to think. Oh, one thing I just did want to mention, small bit of a tangent here, but World Tech IT, for folks who they look at all this and they're like, okay, this is great. I have some familiarity, but I still need experts as far as NGINX goes. World Tech IT so far is the only NGINX certified partner that we have. For folks who don't realize as well, like why we're talking about NGINX on F5 and didn't pick up on the fact that F5 acquired NGINX some years ago at this point, and are maintaining the open source project, essentially. That is why we're talking about that on this live stream. But yeah, all of that is super helpful info for learning all this. What else have we missed here? So World Tech IT, the only NGINX certified partner, as well as F5 solutions as well. Actually, one thing too, I don't think I see it on here, but there isn't, at least at this point, there isn't anything on, say, Kubernetes ingress as a use case, right? I don't see it on here.
I don't believe so.
Okay. We've given them enough, or we give them enough to deal with at this point. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's mostly just open source. I don't think it gets too into the NMS or any of those other products. I think it's mostly just NGINX open source. The questions revolve around. I did think of something that's kind of wanted to tack on to the end here.
Sure.
So, and it kind of builds on what I said earlier. You're never going to work on NGINX in a vacuum. And I'll say this, particularly accounting for some of my experience with F5 and the F5 clients, that NGINX is usually adopted in a more modern ecosystem. So you're really going to want to either have a good understanding or at least a basic familiarity with some of those complementary technologies that NGINX closely works with. So, and we've also kind of mentioned it in some of our labbing approach. So I would just, tell people, hey, when it comes to virtualization, containerization, don't treat those as boogeymen. You're going to want to be comfortable. You're also going to want to be comfortable with the various cloud platforms. A lot of times, NGINX is just a lightweight load balancer that's going to be stuffed into the cloud, and you're going to be supporting it in that type of environment. And then lastly, what I see a lot with NGINX too are CI/CD approaches, whether it's configuration management or it's deploying infrastructure as code. And so beginning to be comfortable in those types of environments and beginning to understand how you fit into those types of environments is very important. So when it comes to your lab approach, if you think you can double down and maybe you're a little bit intimidated by containers, but if you clear that hurdle, you gain experience with containers and experience with NGINX at the same time. I think that's very important. So I would just want to leave people with, don't be intimidated by some of these other technologies that you're going to want to understand. Start getting hands-on with them and start building those skill sets up as well. They'll be very important to you.
That is such great advice. We're not in a vacuum here. I learned that right away when I started at F5, is that your F5 is touching so many parts of the network. And so that's great advice to tackle this right up front. And if you are starting out in your career, this is a great way to force yourself to learn those things that you will have to know. Heidi had one question here. We'll kind of end it with this question for you. How was your test taking experience, and any strategies you want to share for candidates? Lots of test anxiety out there, and what's your experience?
So, I'll say this, I can relate to that. I'm very much the same way. So I would want to reassure people that if you pull up the certification blueprint and you're comfortable with those topics, you're not going to have an issue. I would just very much focus on that certification blueprint. And like I said, if you're comfortable going line by line through that, asking yourself those questions, maybe even building your own questions on top of that, because you truly understand what's being asked and what's at hand, that you're not going to have any issues with the exam at all. That blueprint will more than prepare you for everything that's going to be asked or expected.
Fantastic. And you know what? For me, I haven't actually written a exam in a while at this point, but I always found that I didn't treat failure of an exam as a failure because I got to look at it. Otherwise you don't really get an opportunity to kind of get the feel. And even, when you download some of those prep questions that are out there, they might be totally off from what might be in the exam. It's more, questions that people have kind of come up with themselves that they might have been used for studying, and they're sharing those questions out, but they might not actually have anything to do with anything that will show up on the exam. So, even if you fail once, don't feel bad about it is my advice there.
Yeah, there's no negative to taking the exam. The exposure you're going to grow from, even if you don't pass, like Boo's saying.
I have failed many exams before, not necessarily tech ones either, but I've failed my share of tech exams for sure, for certs. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Dylan. One last thing is, for folks who want to get a hold of you or get a hold of World Tech IT, they want to get engaged, whether it's on DevCentral, whether it's for services engagement, how can people best get a hold of you?
So I would say just our website is probably a good starting place, WTIT.com. I don't really know if there's a good way outside of that. Unfortunately, I don't have much contributions on the way of the Slack channel, so you won't really find me there. But yeah, WTIT.com is obviously going to be the best place to go.
Fantastic. Cool. You guys are always a great follow. We have content that we've done with you guys, and I see that you guys are generating a whole bunch of content that's pretty cool as well, especially for some of the things that are happening these days around, folks wanting to migrate off of legacy platforms and whatnot. I've been noticing that pop up a lot. So you guys know that you'll have certified folks that can work with you if that's your angle or how you want to approach some of the projects that you're doing.
And that even brings up a point that might be worth tying into this call. A lot of what I'm seeing with NGINX is NGINX is displacing a current solution like a hardware load balancer, right? So a lot of what we're doing is trying to have NGINX mimic these hardware load balancer behaviors, right? And so as you go through your different NGINX scenarios, maybe ask yourself, how would I mimic this behavior of this existing load balancer with NGINX, right? Because you might be asking yourself a question that's not a load balancing question. It might be just a straight routing and pass-through traffic question, right? And so it's important to think of NGINX in that context because it is very commonly being used to replace legacy load balancers. And sorry to kind of regress the conversation back into the NGINX and the certification, but I think that's a very important scenario to kind of ask yourself.
Totally. Multiple ways to skin a cat. And F5, is fortunate to offer those ways through whether F5 traditional big IP or NGINX or SaaS services as well. But definitely if you've gone through your NGINX studying, you can think about it in that way. That's great advice.
Awesome.
Very cool. Well, thanks a lot, Dylan. I will pull you into the backstage, and we'll get back in a second here just to talk about some last final things. Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks.
Alrighty, that was great to chat with Dylan there. Wanted to just make sure folks are aware that you can talk to World Tech IT if you've gone through some of the certification stuff, but you still need to augment some skills, or maybe you're tackling your first project after you've gone through an NGINX certification. Always great to have resources and experts like that, and they're world-class ones over at World Tech IT to be able to get you through your first projects, or even to be able to guide you through new implementations while you're taking care of things as far as operational or operations of your NGINX or otherwise environment. Or if you just wanted to find out more about getting certified, we've got all the links. We'll have a link to a whole bunch of the resources as well on community.f5.com. And that will include Blueprint, the FAQ, the cookbook that Dylan mentioned, the NGINX docs, also the Slack channel as well. The NGINX community, which has a certification channel on there, is what I should say. So lots and lots of resources to get you up to speed and ready for your certification. And as always, you can always leave comments wherever we're found as well. So I will say this, not sure when we're going to live stream again. You want to follow along on the channels though, because Jason has been doing a lot of Build It lives, and I believe he's got one coming up for some NGINX stuff pretty soon as well. So lots of NGINX that we're playing with lately, because we are all one company. And you'll also want to follow us for some of the events that we have coming up as well that we'll be appearing at. So Black Hat is another one that is coming up pretty soon here. I've got some content coming out from F5 Revolution App World LATAM, which I was at last week. And I'm just finishing up some of the content that I have from that as well. But, really working on, oh, Jason just left a comment here. We're doing something with Brett next Monday. All right, look out for that. Very, very cool. That'll be a good one. because both are folks who are very, very smart, and they'll be able to take you through some cool solutions on there. I'm sure Brett's going to have something pretty cool to show off. So make sure you like, subscribe, do all those things. We're found on all the platforms, YouTube, Twitter, or X. Jason says subscribe. LinkedIn, all of those things. Follow myself, follow Jason, follow Aubrey as well. We are here to interact with you in the community. Thank you very much, folks. Otherwise, we'll leave you with our little outro here. And yeah, next time we're on live, you'll see Jason and Brett. Otherwise, bye for now. Well, thanks for checking out that video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. While you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. You might want to check out one of these videos over here. And if you haven't already, go check out community.f5.com. This is where all the DevCentral Connects hosts hang out, as well as the rest of the community. It's free to sign up, and we'll see you there.